Hello and welcome to the shop. You might remember a while back I did a collaboration with Zac Higgins, and in that collaboration I made a herringbone pen blank and turned it into a pen. Since that video I've had the opportunity to experiment a little bit and try a few things, and I've come up with a different way of making herringbone pen blanks that I really like. It's super simple, way less messy, and it's a whole lot quicker than the way I made the pen blank in that video. So let me show you exactly what I did. I want to start this project by squaring up my stock. I've got a piece of maple here and a piece of walnut, and what I'm going to do is take two sides off of them, clean them up, and then I'm going to trim them to 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch so my blanks are exactly the same size. Once a side has been jointed, I want to go ahead and just mark it so that I know it's good and flat. I like my turning blanks to be 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. Now my sled is zero clearance to the blade. What I've done is I've come in and I've drawn a line exactly 3/4 of an inch from the edge of the sled. So once I've jointed two sides of a blank, I can lay one of the jointed sides down on the face of the sled, then the back joint, or the second jointed side, I can line up with this line, and I can cut the other two sides that way and get a perfect 3/4 by 3/4 inch turning blank. Taking a look at one of my blanks, you can see the X I've placed here and the X I've placed here, meaning these two faces have been jointed. So what I'm going to do is flip it around to where one of the X's is face down and the other X is on the back side. The face down X lays on the sled, and the X on the back side lines up with the 3/4 inch line down the sled. Then I'll go ahead and clamp down the piece of wood. Finally, I flip the blanks one last time to reveal the final raw edge and trim that off. And what I'm left with are two perfect 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch turning blanks. I've set up a sled on my jigsaw with a stop block that's going to give me a 1/4 inch slice of this 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch blank each pass. Now I'm going to start off by just knocking the first piece off because the end of the blank is not perfectly square, but once the first piece is gone, I should be able just to repeatedly cut segments off this blank until it's completely gone. I finished cutting all of my segments. We have mahogany, walnut, red oak, and maple. Now you'll notice some of the maple has some burn marks on it. What I found was I was cutting very slowly with my sled, and as I sped the cuts up, I got less burning. So that's just something that I need to adjust for in the future. Let me take a minute and talk about some of the items I'll be using to assemble my herringbone blank. First up, I've got this piece of aluminum channel. Now the channel is 1/16 of an inch in thickness by 1 inch deep by 3 foot long, and I got this at the big box store. I'm thinking it was about $5.99, $6.99, something like that. It wasn't very expensive. I've got some standard clothespins that we used to use to hang our clothes out on the line. These were only a couple of bucks for like I think 100 of them. I've got a piece of sandpaper back here. This is 120 grit sandpaper. I've got my Titebond 2. I've got my maple and my mahogany, and I'm ready to start assembly of the blank. When you start assembly, you'll notice there's some fuzzies on the edge of the pieces. What I like to do is just take them back to the sandpaper, give them a quick rub on both sides, And then I like to give the ends a quick rub to take any of the nubbies or fuzzies off. First thing I want to do is take one of my maple segments and I'm going to push it all the way to the back of the channel and I'm going to clothespin it down. Now don't put the clothespin all the way back, and the reason why is we're going to take one of the mahogany segments, get a little bit of tight bond here. I'm going to put some tight bond on it. Just going to smear it around with my fingers. I got a couple of people that get upset when I do that, but you know, that's just the way I like to do things. We'll lay the mahogany on top, press it down tightly, and we'll clothespin it. Now, here's the next part that I want to mention. I got the maple on the bottom and the mahogany on top. They need to alternate, so this time I want to put the mahogany on the bottom and then the maple on top. And when I finally assemble the pen blank, you'll see why I do that. It's important to alternate your segments. Now make sure that your segments are nice and tight, and make sure that they line up on the sides. That's very important. Now what I'll do is I'll just continue right on down this channel, alternating maple, mahogany, mahogany, maple, until I've got all of my pieces glued up, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. I've got all of my blanks glued up and drying. In about 20 minutes, my tight bond should be dry enough where I'll be able to remove the clothespins and start gluing some of these segments to one another. My herringbone segments have been drying for a little over 20 minutes. While they were drying, I took the opportunity to sand up several more segments so that I could start another batch right away. I'm going to go ahead and remove these from the angle iron, and I'm going to sort them into two piles. The ones with the maple on the bottom in one pile, the ones with the mahogany on the bottom in a second pile. One advantage to removing them from the angle iron after about 20 minutes is the glue is set enough to hold the wood, but it's not going to glue them to the angle iron, which if that happens, then you're probably going to break them apart trying to get them off. And they're already starting to stick pretty decently, some of them, to the aluminum. I did a quick inspection of all of my segments, and I noticed that this one, I didn't get the pieces close together, so I've got a bit of a gap. So this one is going to get tossed aside. I gathered up some small clamps and I'm ready to start my glue up. I'm going to choose a segment with maple on the bottom and then one with mahogany on the bottom. And I'm going to attach them like this. So we'll start out by putting some glue on here. I'll make sure that I spread it around as liberally as possible. And then I'll seat one of the mahogany bottom segments. I want to make sure to get plenty of glue down into the crevice down there. Two reasons. Number one, it's going to give me a better hold, and number two, the glue will also fill any minor gaps that might be in there. I found that clamping them this way works really well. You just don't want to put too much pressure to drive them apart, just enough to hold them together. The more glue ups you do, the more you learn. And what I have learned recently is if I take the bottom piece and push it all the way to the back against the back of the angle iron, attach the clothespin, then when I glue the top piece to it, I first take the bottom clothespin and push it all the way in to hold the bottom of the top piece against the angle iron, as well as making sure that the bottom piece didn't slide. I keep it tight against the back, and then I clothespin the top piece. That's giving me a better grip and producing better segments. And then the double segments become quadruple segments. And I'll just keep building them out like this until I have a blank long enough to insert a tube into. Well, it's been a really good night. I've got two blanks completely done. They're dry. They are a little short for my tubes, but that's okay. I got some doubles gluing up back here, and we'll just continue to add doubles to each of them until we get them to the proper length. I've got two more glued up, just like these, and I've got 6 more doubles that I'll be able to make, so I can add on to those to get them to the desired length of whatever tube I want to turn a pen out of. I have a couple of blanks finished, and I'm really happy with how they turned out. This one looks like it's got a little bit of a gap there, but if you look closely, you can see that it's just an overhang on the piece of maple, and the black is part of the burn mark where I burned it when I cut it. But I'm really happy with how they turned out. The pen kit that I'll be using on the one on the left is a Stratus pen kit from Penn State, and the one on the right I'm going to turn into a seam ripper. I thought it would make a really cool seam ripper. I got a few parts left over, but I got several cups full of pieces, so I'll just lay these aside, and when I assemble a few more pieces, I've got a good start on another blank. Let me show you what I like to do with the blanks now to prepare them for turning. I've come back to my small part jointing sled, and I don't know how well you can see this. Let me flip it over. Notice how I've lined the blank up to where the little edges, the little pieces that stick off, are right along the edge of the sled. I'm going to go ahead and trim those off and make this blank perfectly square once again. Now I'll flip the blank around and trim the other side. With the sides of the blank trimmed up, I'm ready to square the blank off to the length of the tube and get it drilled and ready for the lathe. I squared off the ends of my blank to make it easier to drill, and I've gone ahead and placed it in my vise, and I took great care to make sure that it is perpendicular to the vise. This is critically important because if it's not perfectly perpendicular, what's going to happen is you're going to drill off, and if you drill off even the slightest bit, it's going to show in the final pin. I'd like to show you one more thing I'm doing prior to drilling my blank. If you take a close look, all of the tips of the mahogany have a line drawn to connect them, and all of the tips of the maple have a line drawn to connect them. That is the absolute center of my blank, and that's where I want to drill. And I'm glad I did this because when I trim the blank, you can see it's a little bit longer on the right hand side than it is on the left. So by doing this, I'll be able to line my bit up and center it right down the middle of this blank. I did a pretty fair job drilling the hole. You can see if you take a look at the lines, it's lined up perfectly with them. And then on the bottom it comes through, the lines would be here for the tip of this one and here for the tip of that one, and it's right in the middle. I started in the middle of the blank here. I'm a little bit off at the bottom. I veered to a side. I think I should still be okay for the herringbone design, and I'm hoping that it's such a minor amount, we're talking maybe 1/8 of an inch if it's even that much, that it won't affect the blank too much. My concern was it may make a couple of the sections look a little thicker on one side of the blank. But once again, it's such a small amount, I don't know that it'll be a huge issue. I'm going to go ahead and tube it and get it turned. The blank is now tubed and barrel trimmed, and you'll notice that there's CA glue all over it. I was having trouble with the blank wanting to chip out where the little parts met, so what I did is I would barrel trim a tiny bit, and then I would drill thin CA onto the wood, hit it with some accelerator, and barrel trim again, and I did that probably 6, maybe 7 times until I was able to get down to the level of the tube, and I've got a nice flat surface that should yield a good fit to my pen kit. So this is ready to go to the lathe. I really hope that you enjoyed my video today, and if you plan on making a herringbone blank, I hope you give this method a try. Here is the blank that I made that will eventually be turned into a seam ripper. Haven't done that yet because I'm going to be demoing this technique at my Turner's Club, and I want to use this blank as part of that demonstration. This is the pen that I made from the other blank. It turned out wonderful. I do have a video on turning this, and I'll be posting that soon. I kept it separate from this video because the video was getting kind of long, and I didn't want to, drag things out and have a 20-minute video. I would like to thank you for joining me in the shop today. I want you to know that you are always welcome in my shop. Come back and see me again real soon.